Well, hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's Tuesday, the 22nd of January, 2019. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Going to make a couple of adjustments today, and we're going to try to stick to this going forward. I know some of you like to jump on for about 5 or 10 minutes. You want to get the short-range forecast, so I'm going to focus the first 10 minutes of the live stream on that. And from there, we're going to move on to the longer range issues. We're also going to look back tonight. This is the 2-year anniversary of the 2016 mid-January snowstorm that set a record for snowfall in New York City, up to almost just about 27 inches, I believe, in a 24-hour period. And then we're going to look at the weather that's happening across the Atlantic in Europe. I'm going to try to keep things a little tighter and move along. With that said, hellos to my Patreon members. Our growing weather platform has over 220 subscribers now, so it's a great way to support my channel, by the way, and become part of the my Patreon platform, because you get a lot of extra stuff. Live streams that are just for Patreon members. We usually do those in the morning, plus exclusive posts that stay there and are not seen by others. So it's just $2 a month. The link is on the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video. I want to say a big welcome to those of you on my app for Google. It's on Google Play for Android devices, and you can download that for free by just going to Google Play and putting in meteorologist Joe Chaffee. If you need to know how to spell Chaffee, it's right there on the top corner of your screen. Also, a big welcome to those from Angry Ben's Angry Weather's Facebook page. A big hello to those from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page. A big hello to those from meteorologist Jeff Banson's page, and my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. By the way, with respect to the app, if you're waiting for the iPhone version, we resubmitted it today, so keep your fingers crossed that it doesn't get rejected again. And if it doesn't, the link will be up and out there for everybody. So let's get right to what's happening tonight. We do have the latest weather system that is heading toward the Great Lakes. That is the focus of action today. And that is this large area of winter weather advisories. And we have a belt of winter storm warnings up for eastern Iowa, the southern half of Wisconsin, and northwestern Illinois. Chicago is out of it. Excuse me, Chicago's in the winter weather advisory zone. Milwaukee is in it. And I believe Green Bay is at the advisory side of this. We also have winter storm warnings up for northern Michigan, advisories there, and in northern Indiana and northwest Ohio. Now, the warmer air that's coming back to the east is creating some issues, or will create some issues. In the mountains of North and South Carolina, we have winter weather advisories, and that's for some light freezing rain and some freezing drizzle. And the same is going to hold for the northern half of Pennsylvania, basically along or north of Route 76. We're looking at winter weather advisories, and there might be a few more that get added to that tomorrow, depending on whether we get a little bit of precip to break out ahead of the warmer air that's coming up. Advisories up for upstate New York and Vermont, most of northern New Hampshire, and a good chunk, but not all, of Maine. Again, I think the bigger issue here is going to be more along the lines of ice and how long it's going to take for that bitter cold air that has moved out. The core of the cold air has moved out. We made upper 20s to near 30 today. How long is it going to take the inland areas to participate in the warm-up? Because the rain is going to actually make it pretty far north eventually. Winter storm watches up for much of North Dakota and northeastern South Dakota, and we also have various winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up through the northern Rockies and on up through the state of Washington. So it's a busy weather night indeed. And there's no lack of winter weather, even though I know the folks that live in my neck of the woods are complaining loudly about the obvious snow hole that exists from Boston down to Philadelphia. We've seen big snows To the northwest of that, we've seen big snows to the south of that. But every year, there's always a spot that winds up being kind of a dry patch, or what I call a snow hole. And that's what we're seeing so far. From Boston, draw a line from Boston to just north of New York City, just north of, say, northern New Jersey, down to just about, because Baltimore and Washington got their snow. They're running on course, but that snow hole is here. And in past years, we've seen it in other areas. Long Island, for example, which is the the new Buffalo of the East, apparently, has, except for the November snow, has seen very little since. So these things do have a way of evening themselves out over the course of seasons. WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, looking at rainfall amounts this for the next 7 days, up to about an inch and a half to 2 inches in some places in New England, down to about New York City and New Jersey. Another heavy patch in through parts of the Gulf states and running up and down the coast, the west coast of Florida to South Florida, and then it gets a little heavier around the Keys. Dry in the southwest and into California, getting a break from the recent rains, but the northwest busy and the northern Rockies busy. The northern plains and the upper Midwest, not so much, a little bit of moisture. Most of that's going to be, if not all of it, is going to wind up being in the form of some snow. All right, so let's bring up the window and start moving along with our current weather situation. And we do have, as I said, we've got this warm air that is making its way to the northeast. I got to find my window. What did I do with it? Tell me it disappeared. Oh, this is so unfair. Okay, so you know what, guys? While I make a new window, you guys can look at the U.S. satellite loop as it spins away, and that cold air just pretty much sitting out off the Atlantic. It's moved offshore, and one of the big issues at the moment is the fact that we're seeing the warm air coming in, but the cold air in situations like this is always very difficult to dislodge. There's not a whole lot of moisture that's running ahead of this, at least right now. So that's a good thing, because otherwise there would probably be some serious icing problems tomorrow morning if that were the case. We would get a large area of freezing rain, and that's never fun. The big question is whether we're going to see the freezing rain develop at all, and if it does, then we are going to have a little bit of glaze and icing to deal with in my neck of the woods. All right, folks, I'm having just a little bit of a technical difficulty, so just bear with me while I fix this. Let's see if I can get this thing to... There we go. All right, so we're all set. Okay, so first off, with regards to the snowfall with this particular system, here's the latest snowfall forecast map from the Weather Service, and you can see where the bigger amounts are up through the northern lakes in northern Michigan. And there's this trailing area of an inch on either side. It's kind of a narrow band, but there's a band of 4 to 6, 5 to 7 inches that runs from extreme southeastern Nebraska and then goes northeastward through southeastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin. Looks like Green Bay gets 6 out of this, so the warning might extend to them. I'll just have to double check on that. And also in the east, a coating to an inch in parts of western Pennsylvania. You get that far inland, you get this warm air that's coming up. You might see some snow break out ahead of it, but notice it really isn't that much. A coating to an inch or so, some areas getting some 2s and a couple of 3s popping up, and that's about it. And then out in the northwest, in the northern Rockies, and up into the state of Washington, you start to get into some bigger numbers, and even a 38-inch print there up in northern Washington, where you sometimes see some really crazy numbers. So this is no big snowstorm at all. It's a moderate event, but it is an event nonetheless, and it's putting down snow cover in areas where They've gotten quite a bit of it this year, but even up in parts of the Midwest, there are areas in Wisconsin that have been also sitting in their own version of a snow hole. Now, here's the surface map. So you've got this low that's in southeastern Kansas. Here's your cold high right along the Virginia coast, and this is going out in what we would call the bad high position, where it moves off the mid-Atlantic coast, and you get into this south-southwest flow. If you can see it, the numbers are a little bit difficult to see. The temperatures in Kentucky today are in the 40s to around 50. You have temperatures, though, in the 30s and 20s as you move further north into central and northern Ohio, and, of course, back over into Pennsylvania. Most of Virginia didn't get out of the 30s today. These are 4 o'clock numbers. Upper 30s and low 40s in the Carolinas. So, you know, your cold air wedged down the coast. The warm air is coming back first, further to the west, through the Tennessee and into the Ohio Valley, where you already have the southwest isobars, and starting to see some warmer air and some the humidity and the dew points going up across Florida. And then you have the warm sector down in Texas with temperatures and dew points into the upper 60s and low 70s, and then you start to go further north and you got the 50s. That warm front pushes through central Illinois, and that low that you see here in Kansas is going to be running up to the northeast to the Great Lakes. So that means the warmer air comes into the eastern part of the United States. Not a half bad radar tonight in terms of activity. You've got patchy areas of snow and some freezing rain on the southern end, and you go further south, you start to see some rain showers in Arkansas back through East Texas, but we don't see any strong thunderstorm activity. A little bit of shower activity showing up there right on the Mexico-California border. And you've got a lot of precip coming into the Pacific Northwest as we have energy coming in there and bringing those big snow amounts up to the mountains to the east of Seattle and Olympia. So you're going to see some heavy snows there as we showed you. Okay, so let's roll through. We're going to start with, I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to actually use a model that I don't often use, haven't really used very much. And it's a model I actually like to use in wintertime situations. The big issue for tomorrow is the fact that we're talking about really light precip, and some models are picking up on it more than others. Frankly, I'm not 100% sure, at least for my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, just exactly how much we're going to get out of this. But if we start seeing precip breaking out during the morning hours tomorrow, and this is the RGEM, by the way, which is the Canadian regional model, which sometimes does really well with situations like this. And you can see that tomorrow morning it starts to blossom out a small area of freezing precipitation in parts of New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, about where the advisories are posted, and a little bit of sleet there in the Hudson Valley. It's not going to last very long. It's just a matter of if it comes in during those hours between, say, 7 a.m. till about noon, because after that the temperatures are going to be moving higher and it should go to rain. It's not like the weekend storm where you had northeast winds and cold air up from upstate New York and from eastern Canada wedging down into the mountains in Pennsylvania, where you wound up with some significant icing in areas up in parts of the Hudson Valley as you go north of Route 84, for example, and in parts of northeastern PA and in the Catskills. This is not the same thing. We've got southwest winds, so it's a matter of just kind of scouring out the cold air a little bit at a time, and it will eventually win that battle. Then we go over to rain and rain showers and maybe even some heavy downpours here on Thursday. Might rain hard for a little while, and this could be another inch-plus rain producer before it's all said and done. And then it looks to me like you'll probably just end the rain and not go back to any kind of snow. There's a little bit of back-edge snow way up in upstate New York and in Vermont, but it's really no big deal. The RGEM only goes out, by the way, to 54 hours, so I'll pull the full view here. And we're going to switch over to the GFS model and carry you through the next few days. And then we're going to start moving into the long range. So once that goes by, we've got another shot of cold air coming in for starting on Friday. There's actually a little Arctic front here Friday morning. Is a low, is a weak low. There's no L printed there, but it's just north of Lake Ontario. There's a closed isobar. There's an Arctic front that is going to work through, so we're going to have to wait for that to pass Friday afternoon. Once it does, then the core of this cold air mass will be coming in, and it's cold. Make no mistake. It's not as brutal as what we just went through. And if you look at the map, you'll notice the difference from what we had, which on Monday, which was a strong flow of air. We showed you yesterday how it was coming down from Greenland straight south into the mid-Atlantic states, almost a due north wind. That is how you get bitter cold. Real bitter cold here in the east. You can still get bitter cold the other way when it comes in from the west, but those air masses do tend to get modified. Now, that's what's going to happen here. It comes in, it gets pretty cold. You'll notice that we've got another weather front with another shot of cold air approaching on Sunday, and then that moves through. Notice here on the surface map, you've got three systems here, and this is the issue going forward with regards to anything that's going to happen early next week, probably around Tuesday. You've got a lead system that is moving through the northeast on Sunday. You've got some stuff going on down in the Gulf of Mexico, and then you've got this next diver that's coming around. So you've got these three pieces in play, and then that's going to move out. And this system, this is at least how the GFS sees it, emphasizing the diving system coming down out of the plains and heading toward the coast, off the Delaware coast with the low. So it seems to be kind of zeroing in on this. We'll see if it holds. The southern system, which some of the other models were doing things with, on the GFS at least, gets way suppressed. In fact, it even looks the way it's drawn here. You think we were looking at a tropical depression or a tropical storm, but it's not. I just don't understand why it kind of shows it this way. But this is what we're really looking at in the coming days. A series of weather fronts coming through. There will be the opportunity to set chess pieces up for the chance for another chance for some snow. But whether it winds up materializing this way remains to be seen. Okay, so that kind of takes care of things for the next 5 days. Also notice that that all the action really is coming down from north from Canada here. There's not a whole lot at the moment coming into the west after the system that's coming in tonight. So the action is going to shift to the east, and you're going to have systems that are not going to have the same kind of moisture if they wind up if they had the Gulf open or if they had the Atlantic Ocean open. You can get some. You can get something out of this. A minor to moderate event if it plays out correctly, but in terms of getting a big event, at least the way the GFS has it, it would argue against it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the long range. We're going to talk about how this all plays out. And one of the points I made to somebody earlier today in a conversation I was having with one of my Patreon folks, I believe it was, that can you imagine the fact that how many snowstorms have we seen the models print out in the last 2+ months? And the only one that came to be was the one in November, which it really didn't print out as a snowstorm for my area. So it's a good example of why the long-range models are not things you should put your faith into in terms of what the literal prints are. And I've been trying to emphasize the fact that it's more important to figure out what the upper air pattern is, and then you could have a better sense of where we're going when it comes to these systems and how they evolve. So we've got a very broad trough here in the eastern part of the United States. It's cold air, but it's dry when it's like this. It looks like somebody dropped a bowling ball into the eastern U.S. And if you get an upper air flow like this, you could either call it that or what I would used to call the broad bowl. It's a very, very broad flow that goes from northwest to west to southwest. And you do get weak systems that move along. You don't get, the troughs don't have an opportunity to sharpen up. It's just a very broad, gentle flow. And if you're a snow lover, you kind of hope there's some little disturbance along the way. And it's the type of pattern that, you could get systems that produce a coating to a few inches. Maybe sometimes you can get something that could produce maybe a few inches to 6, but that would be the maximum. Now, the issue for early next week is that part of that upper low is going to pull up into Canada. There's another short wave that's dropping down, and you see it here, that drives southeastward with the shot of cold air that we're going to be getting into, the second shot of cold air that comes in on Sunday. That's represented by that upper low and cutoff that drops down into Lake Huron. If you look back up in the northern plains, you see through the Dakotas, the lines kind of get dented a little bit. There's a northern shortwave there, so that's number 2. And then you've got this piece in the south that extends from the lower Gulf, central Gulf states down into the Gulf of Mexico. That's that southern stream system. So there's 3 different parts here. So what the GFS is saying is that the first part lifts out into Maine. Now you've got that second shortwave that's coming down. The southern stream system is way too far ahead. It's just going to get kicked along in the world of the GFS. So it's a matter of the shortwave that's dropping down from Wisconsin back through Iowa and Nebraska to do whatever it is it's going to do. And then that swings around. It holds together okay. It's nothing actually very special. You got a nice little trough that swings on through, but it doesn't get overly sharp. And then it goes goodbye because there's another short wave dropping down into the Dakotas and Minnesota that the GFS in the longer period, now we're at day 9, starts to pull it up toward the Great Lakes, and you actually get a little bit of a ridge in the east. That's for down the road speculation. At this point, we don't really care about that. I want to focus on these 3 pieces here and go back to the European model, because I think it's a matter of which pieces come together. The European model has piece number 1 in southeastern Canada. Notice that it's not nearly as deep, not nearly as intense as the GFS has it. So let me switch back so you can get a sense of this. So here's the GFS for this time frame, which is Monday morning of the 28th. That's a very cold, strong upper air vortex that's over Lake Ontario. The European has a much less deep, much further north system, and that's important because you wind up with more room if that's the case. You have this short wave, the one that's in Minnesota, extends back over down into Nebraska, western Nebraska, and into northern Colorado. The GFS has that short wave much slower, up further north, across Minnesota and going westward toward Wyoming. So the European's speed has a faster system, that weaker northern stream, and it actually has a slightly better looking stream here in the south. And what the European does is, as that northern system lifts out, the second short wave starts to swing around and deepen here. So you have a much sharper trough on the European than you do on the GFS. So here's the GFS. See how it's positively tilted northeast, southwest, kind of a gentler, much gentler look to it. The European has a much more dynamic look to it, as it really kind of tries to phase these pieces. What I would suggest to you to remember, and I think this is really important, the European has been horrific for a while now in that 7 to 10 day time frame. And it's thrown up countless major storms that have not come to be. Now, eventually, as I have often said, broken clocks are right twice a day. Eventually, it's going to get one right if it keeps doing it long enough. But well, I don't know if this is something that's really realistic. I can see how the European gets there because it times out those pieces, but I have my doubts as to whether that is where we're going with this in the longer haul. And look at what happens with that trough at this is day 8. That's a really sharp, negatively tilted, very deep trough that develops here, axis from northern Lake Superior to the Virginia, North Carolina coast. I mean, this is really very, very sharp. And the outcome on the European is also different. We only can see these in between surface runs, but it takes that southern low, almost looks like a tropical system there, if this were the summertime. It's not, but it develops a low literally in the Northwest Caribbean, has it east of the Bahamas, and you also have a low up here in Lake Huron. Eventually, the coastal low is probably going to be the main one, and it will also take over relatively quickly. And that low just blows up to a 977 low in western Maine. If you draw a line, if you assume that it would probably be a straight line track, or maybe it'll go out a little bit further to the east before it turns almost straight north because of how the trough is lifting up. It's like a lever, okay? The upper air is basically like a lever, and it's lifting it up north, northeast, and then northward. If you draw a line from here to here, you're taking a track that probably runs right over Cape Cod into western Maine. So the areas that would be favorable for snow would probably extend back through New York State, or at least through central New York State, down through central PA, and then there'll be a sharp cut. There'll be a cold air question, because if you look at this surface, that's a problem, at least initially, that there may not be much cold air. It has to wait for this northern part to just kind of move in. There's a ton of cold air over the Great Lakes and down into the Ohio Valley that's pressing in behind it, and that big storm's going to eventually sweep it into the east. But ahead of it, you don't have so much. So that would be a big question here. Obviously, the two models are I mean, they're similar in that we are talking about three working pieces, different in terms of the timing. And as I said, I really kind of have my doubts that we're going to go, that this is what the outcome is going to be. That is really a really crazy sharp trough, and then it winds up into southeastern Canada. We would get pretty cold with this. Would be quite cold. I don't know if it would be as, it would be as brutal as what we had, but we probably would be setting up with northerly isobars again from eastern Canada. That we'll get there when we get there. We don't even know if this is going to happen. But I would, to me, the operational GFS model run probably makes a bit more sense in lieu of all the things that we've been seeing this month. Okay, the Canadian, by the way, is kind of like the European, dynamic but not quite as dynamic. But it's got the same general idea, that negatively tilted trough. It just doesn't have it as crazy sharp as the European does. So I'm really seriously mistrusting that particular model. A couple of developments in the super long range. Dr. Judah Cohen's been talking about the polar vortex today. He tweeted some stuff, and I just want to show you here, as we haven't really looked at it in a while. So I've got to bring up the GFS to do it. But he suggests that with the weakened state of the polar vortex the way it is, and I'm going to run back a bit here because you can see the split that exists right now. Let me just make sure you got the visual on the map. You've got a closed, this is up in the stratosphere now, so we're like 9-10 miles up. You've got a part of the one vortex that's sitting in Siberia, in central Siberia. You have the other one that's parked itself pretty far south in Canada over Hudson Bay, and we've been stating that the split that began right around New Year's Day took about 15 days or so for it to play out. We're now beginning to see the outcome of that split. What the GFS proposes, and there's an upper high, by the way, in between. Right here, that circle that says 30-40 over the North Pole. When we go through time, it appears that the vortex in Canada kind of absorbs the vortex in Siberia, at least for a while. But it might be setting up here as we stretch along. You can sort of see a hint of it this is right around February 5th, you see the hint of maybe a resplit. Doesn't quite get there, but the vortex is kind of stretched out, so you have to wonder whether there might be another split in that vortex. The implication of that would be that if it would probably favor a colder pattern that we're in now to continue well through the month of February and at least into the beginning of March. That's what it would seem to me. That doesn't mean that it's cold every single day. That doesn't mean that we don't get warm-ups in between weather systems. Remember, it's all fine and dandy to have the stratosphere doing the things that, if you're a winter weather lover, that you want to see, but it doesn't necessarily translate down at the surface to where you have the troughs in the right spot and the ridges in the right spot. Those are short-range issues, and we're not going to get any kind of vision on from looking at maps today about how that is going to play out. So at this point, let me go back to 2016 and take a look at what was happening. Now, if you remember the winter of 2016, 2015, 2016, we had a super El Nino. And that El Nino dominated the weather pattern throughout the U.S., especially here in the Northeast, where it was virtually snowless in most but not all areas, but virtually snowless, and it was playing out as a typical strong El Nino year. However, there was, as in all patterns in the wintertime, I always say that there's the primary pattern that dominates through much of the winter, and then about halfway it runs for a 4, 5, 6 week stretch. Then it sort of takes a break for a couple of weeks, and then it fires back up. Well, it's kind of took its break here, where we suddenly went into a colder pattern, but we happened to go into a pattern that was somewhat blocky, or at least blocky enough, where we had cold, high pressure draped, much like what we saw last weekend with the storm setup. High pressure draped over the Great Lakes, the western Great Lakes, and on up through southern Canada. You see it here on the map. This is, again, Friday, January 22nd, 2016. Meanwhile, low pressure is down in Georgia and off the South Carolina coast. You've got this warm front just off the North Carolina coast, 20s all the way down into Virginia and into northern North Carolina. And as we go forward, the low and the big forecast problem here was the fact that models were taking this out, offshore, keeping heavy snows away from the New York City area, and that turned out not to be the case. As in fact, when it was all said and done, this is at 1 a.m. Saturday, the low was much more tucked in along the North Carolina coast. As I remember, the European did not really do especially well with this, and it only brought snow to coastal areas at the very last minute. It was the furthest east of all the runs. It had the low much further offshore. Instead, it wound up getting tucked in just off the Delmarva Peninsula. Right there, you can see there was a less than 988 low, and now you're seeing the snow wound up pushing up northward, north of New York City. But once you started going north of 287 and then on up toward Route 84, I think Route 84 wound up being the cutoff line, and you literally went from a coating to 10 inches over a matter of about 2 or 3 miles. Usually with these intense storms, that's what winds up happening. And the low just kind of sat there off the Delaware coast for a while, and the coastal areas, Long Island, but particularly from New York City south and west, down through Philadelphia, through Washington, D.C. I mean, this was a solid I-90. This was a very big I-95 storm. Less so as you went up toward Boston. I think Boston only got 8 inches out of this, but for New York City, for Philadelphia, down to Baltimore and Washington, this was quite the snowstorm indeed. And then, of course, it's gone, And there were a few storms in February and March, but they impacted more the coastal areas than anything else. Long Island had a couple of 10-inch snowfalls after that during the month of February inside that very warm pattern. I'm going to put this map up on the chat board for you, the link to it, so that if you want to go back, you can go back actually to about 1985 and pull up surface maps every 3 hours, and it's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool little tool to have. So I just put the link there up on the chat board, and if you're watching this on the replay, just ask in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to put the link up there for you. If you can't find it, you can go to just the Weather Prediction Center website. If you Google that, Weather Prediction Center surface analysis, you should bring it up. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on in Europe, because we're talking about England and Ireland getting some snow during today, and actually we did see some, not a whole lot, and there is more opportunities for snow going forward. Looks like over the weekend on Sunday you're going to get some northerly wind, so that should bring down some cold air up from the Arctic regions east of Greenland and bring in some snow showers perhaps off the North Sea. And then there's a more important push of colder air. Models have shifted a little bit further north at this run, with a low here, a 991 low coming into the North Sea and dropping southeastward. But I think you're going to see something from this. And the other major change, by the way, is if you look, now we're at day 9 or 10 and beyond, but the easterlies here, folks, okay? So you're getting the flow from Siberia. That's one thing that's been lacking through all of this, is that you haven't really been getting that easterly flow, and that sets up in the long-range period, starts to set up about February 1st, and then strengthens going into the 2nd and 3rd. So you got a pretty solid easterly flow. And by the way, if the model's correct, the core of that flow actually shifts southward into France and Spain and over Italy, and a lot of snow is being indicated here. You got a couple of storms that are going to be swinging southeastward into the Mediterranean that take shape, and here's one in particular. There's one actually before this, but this was being shown around day 10 or 11. I've been finding, by the way, that the GFS on the European side seems to have a bit more consistency in its long range than the one on the North America side. I'm not quite sure why that's the case. It just seems to be that way. But this is pretty cold for Europe. I'm going to be curious as to what let's take a look at the snowfall, and then I'll come back. I'll put the snowfall map. So, this is 10-day snowfall. So there's some fairly solid snowfall being indicated for Scotland, and even some halfway decent snow amounts, if you want to call them that, up to 15 centimeters in parts of southwestern England and in the northern part of Ireland, and of course considerable snow throughout France, down into northern Spain, particularly in the mountains, and in eastern Spain. Italy gets a solid snow. Might be a situation where snows in Rome here. Looks like it snows a good chunk of the state all the way down into the southern part again. We've already seen that happen. And the interior across western and central Europe picking up a significant amount of snow. Back to the U.S., and we'll look at the 10-day snowfall. I always say when you look at these snowfall maps, you can't use these as forecast tools necessarily, but if you want to kind of give a broad brush as to where the models think snow is going to occur, it's probably it's probably a reasonable tool to look at in a general way. But over the next 10 days, going into February 1st, it does show the southern extent of accumulating snow, getting fairly far to the south, down to about 35 north into Virginia, western North Carolina. It seems to be active from coast to coast, north of 35 degrees north, and some areas getting significant amounts over the next 10 days. Nothing crazy. If there's one thing we've learned over the last couple of weeks, is when you see these models throw out these crazy amounts, it's very important to be highly skeptical of them, especially the European model, which, as I said, has been horrible in the 7 to 10 day time frame. It's been arbitrarily putting storms in and then taking them away. And don't be shocked if the night run comes in and backs off from what it did today, because it's been an every other run affair with the European lately with regards to the next weather system. So, nice crowd tonight. Welcome every... Oh, I forgot. One last thing. Hold on. Thanks, Dio. Dio Nankumar. I don't want to forget my friends from Canada, okay? So I'm going to try to keep a certain sense of order here with regards to doing things every night. I know sometimes in these live streams I've had occasions where I've been a little, how shall we say, unfocused. So I want to make sure I get everybody covered. So we will tonight, we're going to go to Canada, and here's your 10-day snowfall, which is significant away from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. These are in centimeters, so we're only looking at 10 to 15 centimeter amounts in both Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. Some higher amounts being indicated in some of the higher terrain. It goes higher as you go through New Brunswick, and of course down into Quebec and up into Labrador starts to tail off a little bit. And with respect to the day-to-day weather, whoops, I didn't have to do that. So let's pull up the day-to-day weather for Canada here, and we'll roll it back. I noticed earlier today there were a number of snow changing to rain situations for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and New Brunswick, and here's one, the one that's affecting the east Wednesday and Thursday, and this is also the storm that's affecting the Midwest tonight. So that's a snow to rain situation, and that goes out. And then as we move through the weekend and into next week, that looks to be snow to rain over Newfoundland at least. Now, this is the Sunday night cold front that we're looking at here, that by Tuesday is moving up to the northeast toward off the coast of New Brunswick here, deepens to an 83 low. So you've got cold air coming in there, and here comes that low. If you see it on the lower left, is what the GFS has, that low over Long Island, just south of Long Island, moving northeast. That's a snow to rain event for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as the low deepens a bit as it moves into Labrador, and that moves out. And here's another rain. Actually, this is a rain changing to snow case in the long range, so we're too far down the road at this point. But you get the idea. And with respect to temperatures, by the way, if the European were correct with its low in western Maine, then it's all rain here for this area, if that low winds up being there. Just want to kind of really quick look at the temperatures. Yeah, they're cold. You're 20, 30 below zero. Actually get a bit of a warm-up here. We go up into the single digits. Actually go to the low single digits below zero for a little while. And then all the hefty below zero temperatures actually shift a bit westward. So this is the middle of next week. So if you wind up with a strong storm up in western Maine that goes northeastward from there, you're going to drag some of this cold air south. So there's always that chance that you could wind up seeing, and by the way, this is in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Let me put a perspective here. This is in Celsius, and definitely not Fahrenheit, but it's still pretty cold. Minus 40 is, minus 40 Celsius and minus 40 Fahrenheit are the same. So you're talking 20 to 30 degrees below zero, or 15 to 30 degrees below zero readings here in eastern Canada as we go through the next week. So there's going to be another big pocket of bitter cold air. So if you get the right setup, some of that cold air is likely to get drained southward like we saw yesterday. But that falls under the category of long-term speculation, so we're going to leave it there. And now let me come back to the chat board with everybody on this really nice night, by the way. It's amazing how much less painful it felt today once you took the once you took the wind away. Reaver 501 instructional videos on the 500 million charts. Yes, that is on my list of things to do. So what I'm hoping is that I get a little bit of time on Saturday to start cutting short less than 5-minute instructional videos / explainers on the maps that you see to get you up to speed a little bit, so that when I'm showing you stuff, it doesn't look all that foreign to you. All the different lines kind of crisscrossing each other, and what the colors mean and what they don't mean. So I am going to start doing that. You can look, the maps I use are on tropicaltidbits.com, which is a really great site to go to with respect to trying to see all the weather models. But I'm going to try to make some time this weekend. My goal is to try to get at least 2 of them done and then gradually add to them. And as we get toward the spring, once we get out of the winter months and things start slowing down with from the standpoint of winter storms, I'll be able to get more and more of them on. Do I see in February the CAD effect happening in western North Carolina to promote cold air? I'm sorry, it takes me a while sometimes to figure out acronyms, and I didn't know there was an acronym for cold air damming. Look, if the pattern is the way it is, Jason Boyer, I think you may at some point get an opportunity. But the key to that is whether we go to any kind of blocking pattern. And the NAO is negative, the problem is the NAO encompasses a huge geographic area in the North Atlantic. So a negative NAO doesn't necessarily mean you have blocking. You could have a negative NAO, but the pattern could still be pretty progressive. If you've got we have this upper ridge that's built from along 40 degrees west that goes all the way up through the Atlantic to Greenland, that would give you a negative NAO, but it's not going to give you the blocking that you'd want to see. But I would suspect that at some point, since we've already seen 2 systems where cold air damming for the mid-Atlantic states was part of the equation, my suspicion is that we're going to see it appear again. Jess Harden, my opinion on snow in Alabama for next week is the same as it was. You're going to have to wait to get a cold air mass to come all the way down. It may eventually happen. I don't know when, and I don't know that I see it in the cards at the moment, the way things are setting up. Now weather systems come from Canada this year and not from the west, because in some instances when weather systems come from the west, they become big if they move up to the northeast. On the other hand, Dio, if you look back at the winter of 2013, 2014, a lot of our systems came down from the northwest, and a number of them not only produced hefty snows around here, but those 2 winters, I believe, in those 2 winters, at least from the standpoint of the New York City area, every single snowstorm that we had was produced with temperatures at 25 or less, and a number of them were produced where temperatures didn't get out of the teens. So we were really deep in the cold air during those 2 winters, but we still had ample opportunities for snow that came along and came down out of Canada. So it's not necessarily the case that you can't produce big storms from systems that come down from Canada. If you've got the right setup, you can always find a way. And in those 2 winters, we happened to be able to do that. 14 consecutive hours in the January 22nd, 23rd, 16 storm of at least 1.5 inches an hour, which that was pretty phenomenal. It did, as the snow lovers like to call it, it was puking snow at times. You were right last night. Keep up. Oh, okay. Thanks. Whatever I was right about. Thanks, Vito Spano. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. Shelly Man Studios want spring. You want spring temps. Well, you'll get them later tomorrow and into Thursday before it gets cold again. But Bobby Whitaker wants a nice blowtorch. Well, I don't know when that's coming. At some point, the pattern may relax for a little bit, but perhaps we already saw that relaxation from mid-December to mid-January, even though I wouldn't describe that period that we had as a blowtorch pattern. It was a little warmer than normal, but it wasn't crazy warm with that stretch from mid-December to mid-January. Running back here, Johnny Quest. One thing good about jumping off a cliff in your area is there plenty of water to catch you. I know, you poor guy. You've had a handful there between the rain and of course you've also had snow this winter there on top of everything else, and then you had a bit of a deep freeze. Unreal. What are you gonna do? Sometimes it happens, and then one day that pattern will break. It's not going to stay like that forever. Folks, it's easier to track a tropical system coming into the North Carolina coast to make sense of these global models dealing with the winter weather in the U.S. I think you're absolutely correct, Rich. With all the variables that exist with tropical storms, oftentimes you're dealing with just basically an upper high and maybe one trough, and that's it. And the tropical system. Here you're dealing with everything. 3 pieces, 5 pieces. You have to look at what's going on in the Pacific. You have to look what's going on in the North Atlantic. There's so many parts. There's so many different working parts with the weather systems in the wintertime than they are in the summertime with the tropical systems. Not that it makes the forecast necessarily that much easier or harder. They're both hard for different reasons. You're dealing with the vast power of a tropical system and the volatility that brings. On the other hand, with more players in the equation with the wintertime systems, you can see so many ways that your forecast could go wrong in short order. And as I have said, with regards to snow forecasts, remember that all snow forecasts bust for somebody somewhere. Okay, you can't be. It's very hard to get an absolutely perfect forecast for a geographic zone of a couple of 100 miles. You're going to be off for somebody. My forecast for Saturday, if I had drawn my lines 25 miles further to the north, they would have been perfect. But that 25 miles made some difference. It wasn't a huge difference. It did make some difference in terms of the outcome. If I had my zero line 25 miles further north and west, I would have had an almost perfect forecast. But those are very, very hard to do, especially when you're dealing with the variable of temperatures that could easily be off by several degrees, or the GFS weather model, which at times over the weekend they were 5 and 10 degree temperature errors that existed in a lot of the inland spots. All right, so that I think pretty much wraps it up tonight, folks. Thanks for being here. Let me encourage you, if you'd like, if weather is your thing, I think you'll really like the Patreon platform that I've set up for all weather, all the time, or most of the time, because I do have to sleep. You get live streams that are just for Patreon members. You get exclusive posts just for Patreon members, and we've been doing some other things, kind of like weather school, trying to get the members involved in forecasting and in what what it's like to put down forecasts and put down numbers. Last weekend, I had them all do first call snow maps, not by force, so you certainly had the choice. But and I still haven't had a chance to go through them all, which I will do. But if you would consider it, it's a great way to support my channel. It's just $2 a month to subscribe. You get you can message me at any time. And I usually respond in a timely manner within a couple of hours. And again, I put the link up on the chat. It's also available on the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video. Google Android owners, let me just give you my Google Play link if you'd like. Even though the app is kind of directed toward the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, Long Island area, I do put up a lot long-range stuff on there that writes for a more general, in a bit more of a general way, that covers a larger geographic area. So you might be interested in that, and it's absolutely free. So you can download that on Google Play. The app version, the iPhone version, as I said earlier at the beginning, has been resubmitted today to Apple. So everybody say like a collective prayer, light a candle, that Apple will approve it once and for all. And by the way, the update that will be coming on the app will give you the opportunity to pull down a forecast for your local zip code in terms of the current weather and everything else. There's a Zoom radar on there that's pretty cool. So I got to get these apps updated, the Google Play app updated and the iPhone app approved by Apple. So again, collective candle lighting, okay? And those will be and always will be free. 9:25 tonight on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. We will do the Joe and Joe Weather Show. If you don't have Facebook, not to worry. I usually upload the show to YouTube either by midnight, or if I'm falling asleep when I get home, I do it first thing in the morning. So it will be up there one way or the other. So look for that. And those of you that have the Android app, you can watch the live streams from the Android app, and you can watch the Joe and Joe Show from the app when I upload it. So that's another good plus with regards to the app itself. And as far as tomorrow is concerned, regular schedule, Patreon guys, live stream tomorrow morning might come a little bit earlier and maybe a little bit shorter, if only because of the fact that I have an 11 o'clock appointment to get my haircut. And I got to keep that because it's getting really kind of long and scraggly, and I got to get cleaned up back behind my neck. So tomorrow's my opportunity. My hair guy is good. So I want to make sure I get to him when I can, because he's very busy and he's hard to book. And we'll have a normal day tomorrow, regular live stream here on YouTube at a couple of minutes after 7 o'clock. And that's pretty much it. Look for some posts coming up on Patreon as well. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for being here. We will. It's not a rug, Reaver. This is my natural hair. For God's sake, I'm going to be 60 years old. I've got quite a good head of hair, and it's not all gray either. So I haven't really exactly led a stressful existence. Let's put it that way. Even though I am in the weather world, my hair is actually kept up pretty well. Have a great evening, everybody. Hi, Lord Kate. We'll see you later on Facebook or tomorrow right here on YouTube.